Well, hello! Welcome back to my channel. Joshana here to talk about several frickin' books. The first two I did talk about. They were part of my fantasy romance deep dive round 2, so I won't go super in-depth into these ones, but the first one was Slave to Sensation by Nalini Singh. I read this actually back in July, and yeah, it's paranormal, urban fantasy, sci-fi, speculative fiction, and it's adult. I quite enjoyed this. I liked the characters. I enjoyed the world building. The kind of sci-fi elements were really interesting to me. I enjoyed the romance. I didn't love the characters necessarily, which I think is why I gave it, I don't want to say a lower rating, but I would have given it a higher rating had I been more really invested in the characters. But I will continue with this series for sure because I enjoyed the writing style enough. And each book, to my knowledge, to my understanding, follows different characters in this world. So it's one of those. It's like the Immortals After Dark by Kresley Cole, same type of thing where it's same world, same circle of characters, but each book follows a different pairing in that world. So I will continue. I ended up giving this one 3.75. And yeah, I'll have that video linked down below if you want to check out my vlog style thoughts and my deeper thoughts on it. And then the next one, which I completed in the beginning of August, was also for round 2, and that was Heart of Blood and Ashes by Milivane, another adult fantasy romance, this one. And it's like a high fantasy, completely made up world, etc. It was cool. I didn't hate it. The female lead was definitely my favorite character. I enjoyed the male lead also, and I enjoyed their romance for the most part. I just didn't really feel all that connected to them, even though they were cool and I liked them. Just wasn't that invested in them. This book just felt too long to me. It felt like it was about 200 pages too long. There's a lot of meandering. They're on this journey and it takes forever. Content warnings, there are references to rape, gang rape, torture, pretty gruesome torture. Those things are not on page, but like I said, they are described after the fact or like referenced more so after the fact. They're not described in like great detail. And then also content warning for forced, some people might consider this spoilery, but you don't know which character I'm referring to or the details and what ends up happening with the situation. But there is a content warning for a forced miscarriage attempt, so forewarning for that. There is also gruesome murder. I mean, it's fantasy, there's people being killed, there's warring between kingdoms, etc. But yeah, I enjoyed it mostly. There were sections that I was really engaged with, and then the pacing would fuck it all up, and I was like, okay, oh my god. So I ended up giving this one a 2.75. And then I had a DNF from the fantasy romance, which was Touch the Dark by Karen Chance. Paranormal, urban fantasy, written in like 2006, and it just had very 2006 paranormal fantasy vibes, the tone of it, and that was kind of, I was just like, nah, I don't care. And then I read this book, I picked it up thinking it was fantasy romance. It's just romance. Oops, so I didn't include it in the deep dive necessarily, but that is Drag Me Up by R.M. Virtues. This is a self-published Hades and Persephone retelling, and it's a contemporary in this world. It's like the gods, they all have their same names and same like personalities and character relationships, so to speak. So like you recognize them right away, but they're just living in this city, running things, like this family. They run the show. They have their different districts that they handle. And it's like kind of like a mafia-esque setup, with like the mob bosses in the different areas. That type of vibe, and they handle all the trade and whatever. They're like politicians, but also not. I don't know. And I had a fairly good time with this. So in this one, Hades is running a Vegas-style casino, and Persephone has left the clutches of her mother and is like what's it called? Oh my god. She does like acrobatic shit for a show, and that show has come to Hades Casino to do their show there. So I enjoyed the characters overall. Hades and Persephone's relationship was fun and cute and sexy. I liked it. I appreciated that there was no, as always, when there isn't big miscommunication stuff, I always appreciate that. There was like a slight misunderstanding of feelings in one part, but it was very quickly resolved. It was like an assumptive thing, like someone assuming how the other person felt instead of just asking them, but like within 12 hours they talked about it. So for the world building, some of the politics going on between the different districts, I didn't love. I didn't I wasn't like, oh my God, this is making me angry. But some of it felt a little convoluted, I want to say. I don't know, where I just was like, what? But it doesn't really matter. That's not the focal point, Sometimes the dialogue wasn't my favorite, which if you have been following me for a little while, you know that can make or break a book. I didn't hate it, but it was just sometimes it didn't feel consistent. There were times where a character would be speaking to this one person and they would sound a little bit more refined and proper. But then either in the same conversation or in a different conversation with that same person, they would all of a sudden be really casual, using slang, shortening words, abbreviating things. And it just kind of didn't, a couple times it just tripped me up where I was like, wait, why is that person talking like that? They don't normally talk like that. And it wasn't obviously, I speak differently when I'm in a work meeting than when I'm sitting here talking to you guys. It wasn't stuff like that. Like I said, it was similar scenarios, situations, environments, sometimes the same person they were talking to. And so just a little bit of inconsistency with that bugged me a little bit. The sex scenes were stellar. They were really fun, very spicy, thoroughly enjoyed that. The detail, the emotion along with the physicality of it, I really appreciated that. As I said, though, for the plot, some of the scheming stuff fell a little flat for me, especially towards the end. It was kind of the stakes didn't feel especially high, I guess. So some themes here, definitely found family, acceptance. We have characters in here who are trans. We have POC characters. It's not a spoiler at all. Persephone in this is a trans woman. I really enjoyed how all of that was handled. Obviously, I cannot speak to the authenticity of the representation, but I really appreciated that message of acceptance that was in here. Finding yourself, fully being yourself, and just getting that acceptance from other people. It was very nice to see. Also, personal responsibility and accountability was a pretty big thing going on here with Hades and Zeus. I ended up giving this 3.25 Pushinicorns. And then I took this back to the library already. It's very sad times. It was the second book in a duology, and I DNF'd it. Illusionary by Zoraida Cordova. It's a young adult fantasy. It is an Inquisition-era Spain-inspired fantasy world. The little blurb: an epic tale of love and revenge set in a world inspired by Inquisition-era Spain pits the magical Moria against a terrifying royal authority bent on their destruction. So that's the premise of the first book. Things have happened. I don't want to spoil anything. Our main character's name is Renata, which is my mother's name, or it could be pronounced Renata as well if it's in Portuguese. I have a friend whose name is Renata. I was like, that's my mom's name. And then she was like, oh, you probably pronounce it Renata, huh? And I was like, yeah, but she told me that the correct pronunciation for Portuguese, at least, is Renata. So that's what I call her. At any rate, our main character, I'm going to go with Renata, because in Spanish, it would be an R sound. But yeah, she irritated me slightly in this book. A little bit. She was kind of getting on my nerves. She annoyed me a little bit with this in the first book, too, and I just was hoping it wouldn't be as prevalent in this book. She did terrible things when she was a child, because she, number one, was basically being held hostage. I mean, she was being held hostage, and it was kind of a Stockholm Syndrome situation. She was being bribed with treats and special treatment while living in this castle to use her magic to create hollows, which are people where she has sucked all their memories away and they die. And so she was killing people in this horrible way, but like she kind of didn't really understand what she was doing for a while because she was very little. And then also like she was being bribed and held hostage against her will and told like you'll be punished if you don't do this. And you're a little kid. You know what I mean? And now she's older and she just beats herself up all the time, constantly. Am I even worthy of people being nice to me? Am I worthy of kindness? Am I worthy of love? Do I even deserve anyone to be nice to me ever? Like, yes, you fucking do. And obviously I understand it's a fantasy world, but I understand that like trauma affects people pretty severely sometimes and in different ways, of course, right? But it just felt a little excessive. It sucks, and that's still trauma you have to deal with. Like, you know you did this, and you saw it, you lived it. Like, you gotta grapple with all of that, but you also gotta be mature enough and grown enough to understand that that doesn't mean you're a bad person now. It doesn't even mean you were a bad person then. It felt like her whole personality was just, am I even worthy of kindness? Like, she just literally doesn't think she deserves anything positive in life. She questions if she deserves anything that is good or positive all the time. And yeah, at a certain point, like I said, I understand it can be realistic for people, but it wasn't enjoyable for me to read in this character's perspective for that long. And yeah, I got about 60% of the way through this before I realized I was kind of forcing myself to pick it up. And when I was picking it up, I wasn't loving it. Towards the end, some of the plot stuff started to feel just really kind of juvenile and contrived. I mean, it's young adult, but it just started to feel really contrived and like weak sauce. I was like, that's our big plan here? Okay. I guess. It just like a little, I hate to say it, but like it felt a little cheesy, a little corny, a little half thought through. Like, we didn't really think this through all the way. This is a very weak sauce plan, you know? It was just annoying me. So yeah, it wasn't a terrible time. If you really loved the first book, I'm sure you'll have a good time with this one. It just wasn't a good enough time for me to care to continue the last 40%. And then another DNF from the romance thing, so I won't get super into it. Pestilence by Laura Thalassa. This is a fantasy romance, obviously adult, with one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse, literally, pestilence. And romance happens. I realize I do not enjoy torturer to lover as a premise. Nope. That's about that. And then another DNF from the fantasy romance deep dive, Chastely Bitten by Lexi C. Foss. Also realize I do not care for a master-slave situation. It was a vampire owning a human woman. Could have gotten past it, except because he was trying to like do good and like break her of her submissiveness and then use her secretly to try to get humans' rights because he believed humans should have rights. I'm like, okay, I can work with that. But the inconsistency. This character would say like, I crave her consent, and then, within the same chapter, just be like grabbing up on her and kissing her neck very much without her consent. Like they weren't in an established relationship yet. So I was like, bro, do you or do you not? And then also being like, I know it's wrong, but I think it's really sexy that I own her. What? No, I can't do it. Mentally, I'm blocked. I can't get past it. So DNF that. And then this one I barely got into, Jinn by Jessica Cage. I got 10 to 15% of the way in or so, and I just wasn't feeling it. I can't even remember really. Just wasn't connecting with it. Some of the plot stuff I was getting tripped up on and like hung up on. And I was just like, no. Nope. So after that run of DNFs, literally 4 books in a row. And all 4 of these I DNF'd within like a 24 to 36 hour window. Yeah, the fuck. But then, thankfully, I had a great read. This is historical fiction, The Girls at the Kingfisher Club by Genevieve Valentine. And this is adult. The main character you're following is very much a grown-ass adult. Some of the other characters are younger, but I would consider it adult since the main one we're following is very much a grown woman. She's like in her late 20s, I think. It is a reimagining of, what is it called? The 12 Dance... What is it fucking called? 12 Dancing Princesses. Reimagined in the Roaring Twenties. So we have 12 sisters that are kept caged up in their Manhattan townhome by their father. And he rarely sees them. Some of them he literally never sees. Some of these 12 daughters that he has. There's really only like 2 or 3 that he ever interacts with on a regular basis. He does not go to their portion of the house. They do not go to his portion of the house. And that's that. They sneak out to go dancing most nights when they're of age, Prohibition era. And then one day, their father tells the eldest, who we're mostly following, Jo, also known as the General by the other sisters, that he is going to start marrying them off. And they're in a bit of a panic because, understandably, logically, they are concerned about the type of men that their father will pick for them, because of the type of man that he is, who did not care about his wife and just used her to try to produce a male heir, and until she died when they were young, and never really cared about her and kept her pretty much locked up in the house also. And like most of these girls, they've never seen the light of, like, they've never been outside during the daylight. And they don't know what the front of their house looks like because they always sneak out through the back. Like, they have no understanding of the real world. So the older girls are very concerned about the men their father's going to pick. And things ensue from there. So I really enjoyed these characters. Getting to know their relationships was really fun. Obviously, at first, it's 12 sisters and you're just like, name. I don't understand. But throughout the book, and it's not a super long book, but you got to know them and you got to know their dynamics and who is closest with who and what their order of age is. Like, by the end of it, like, I totally knew, oh, that's so-and-so, and like, I know who that sister is and her relationship to everyone else, etc. So I quite enjoyed that. The writing style I really enjoyed. I definitely want to read more from this author and see if I enjoy everything they write. There were little moments of whimsy and wit, which I always like. I think there was one quote. There was a few moments like this, though. There's a couple, like, good moments or whatever, but maybe not to save the quote, but just, like, funny stuff, you know, moments where I was like, ha, like, kind of laughing out loud. This one, little line here, they're out dancing, a couple of the girls, because only the older ones go, so at the beginning, there's only, like, 4 of them that are old enough to go out, and then as they age up, more and more get to go. But anyways, this is Jo. We're referencing her. She caught him looking at her a lot that night, in a way she wasn't used to seeing. A lot of gents looked at you a certain way when they were guessing their chances for a kiss. 0. But this wasn't it. He watched her like he had come home after a long absence and had missed her most of all. Just like little moments like that where I was like, oh yeah, I like that. And there was a couple of oh shit moments where I was like, oh my God, what the fuck? Towards the end, things hit the fan, shit hits the fan, my God. And there were a couple of emotional moments toward the end where I got genuinely choked up and where I was like, if this was a movie, I would lose my shit at this scene. Oh my God. Like, just like, oh my God. So yeah, I was definitely engaged with the plot throughout, which was kind of surprising to me given the premise and the fact that we are literally in like 2 places the whole time. Like, they're either in their rooms or out at a club dancing, and it's basically like 2 clubs that we really are at most of the time. But yeah, I really enjoyed their dynamics, their relationships with each other, and seeing all of that play out. And obviously, like, what are they gonna fucking do about the situation they're in, you know? So themes here, I mean, probably pretty easy to tell. Feminism is a pretty big theme here. Personal agency, being a lot, like freedom and just liberation in general in life. Toxic family in a parent form. Be forewarned, I would say, for that if you're interested in this. If you have a very toxic, controlling, that style of abuse in a parent, be careful. It's not, I don't know, like, is it intense? I don't know. I feel like it is kind of intense. Like, they're basically kept locked up in the house and they cannot leave. And yeah, so forewarning for that. So yeah, this was definitely a good time. I really enjoyed this book quite a bit. It's been sitting on my shelves for fucking ever. I don't even remember where I got it. I think I got it in like a thrift books haul forever ago. It was just a random book that I was like, yeah, sure, I'll grab that. Some historical fiction, why not? So many times I've looked at it and been like, should I unhaul this? Am I ever gonna read it? And I just finally was like going through all these fantasy romances that I was DNFing. I was like, I need a cleanse in my brain. So I was like, historical fiction, let's just, fuck it. I'm gonna grab this one. And I'm so glad I did. I ended up giving it 4.75 Pushinicorns. Almost 5 stars. There's a couple things at the end, a little bit it felt slightly rushed, where I was like, if this had been fleshed out a little bit more, I probably would have given it 5 stars. I want like a follow-up book though. I don't know if there is one, but I want to know like what happens with all of them after the fact, you know? And then the last one for this, fucking finally, God, how long have I been talking? I don't know. Heart on Fire by Amanda Bouchette. This is book 3 of the Kingmaker Chronicles. And I, can't talk about the plot a whole hell of a lot. This is a world that has a lot of Greek mythology elements involved. Very much a high fantasy world. The main character has a fair amount of gods-given magical abilities. There's a prophecy involved, and it's romance. By the 3rd book, the romance has been established, obviously. And I feel like I didn't love this. I didn't love it. I borderline disliked it, but I didn't quite. The characters were essentially the same characters, but just the way they were interacting with each other was kind of annoying me. And then the writing style annoyed me more than in the previous 2 books. So this series, I don't know if it's this author all the time, I would imagine so, but in the 1st book, I noticed it, where she'll use a fair amount of exclamation marks, not in dialogue. Like, in the narration, she'll be like, because it's the main character, we're in her head, it's first-person point of view, which I guess, but so she would have a thought of and then, I don't know, I'm just gonna make some shit up. And then he stepped into the fire, and I couldn't see him, okay? A profound, oh my God. And she'll put an exclamation mark. So it's and then he stepped in the fire and I couldn't see him. And that's how I read it in my head. And I kind of fucking hate it. Like I said, in the 1st book, it didn't really annoy me. I kind of just I don't really care because I was loving so much of the other stuff. And in the 2nd book, I kind of could brush it aside. But for some reason, in this book, I just was okay, stop doing that, please. Pretty please. And then the constant internal monologuing from the main character. Most of this book was it was like a diary entry or a therapy session where she was just talking out her thoughts and feelings and how she feels about Griffin, the male love interest, and what she thinks of what's their relationship like and the growth she's felt and had in her life and what that means for how she feels about Griffin and how she feels about this person and that person. And just, oh my God, I get it. Holy shit. I was getting so irritated. I started, admittedly, heavily skimming when she would start doing this. It would be pages, many pages in a row of just thinking about how she feels about Griffin. I'm I already know how it's been established since the 1st fucking book. How you feel about Griffin. There was no real, conflict within the relationship, and there was no real external conflict on the relationship either. And so it was just kind of tired. I get how you guys feel about each other. I already know how you feel about each other. Nothing new has happened to change or deepen your feelings for each other. It's the same level of deepness. And so there were times where she would be professing her love to Griffin, or he would be professing his love to her. And it felt like the author was writing it in a way where I was supposed to be oh, look at how they feel about each other. Oh my God. But instead I was yeah, I get it. I know. You guys you love each other. You're deeply, profoundly in love. I understand. This isn't new information, And then the ending, plot-wise, was kind of lackluster, where it was kind of well, what the hell was the point of all of that? Feeling that I had, so there's that. See, I didn't hate it, but like I said, I found myself skimming whole sections and being I don't really care. and it was slightly less than a fine time. Hence, I gave it 2.5 Pusheenacorns. Not great, but I still really, really liked the first book, and I enjoyed the second book a fair amount too. So I'll probably keep it, and honestly, I could see myself rereading at least the first book and just like headcanoning the last, or just knowing like, yeah, I know how it ends, I don't really care. But just like wanting to revisit their dynamic in the first book, because I loved their dynamic in the first book. There we have it. So many books, but mostly DNFs. Oops. Let me know any thoughts you have about any of these. I'm very sorry if you are one of my romance reader friends and I have broken your heart. I'm looking at you, Heather. I'm sorry, okay? As always, thank you so much for your time. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.